Good evening. I'm Rob Wright, the Interim Dean of the John H. Daniels Faculty of Architecture, Landscape and Design at the University of Toronto, and it is my honor to welcome you all to tonight's event. In conversation with BAIDA, the Black Architects and Interior Designers Association. The conversation tonight is our installment in the Pan-Canada Lecture Series, initiated by the Canadian Council of University Schools of Architecture. The Pan-Canada Lecture Series joins 12 schools of architecture together around the theme of diversity. And now I'd like to invite Jane Wolfe, Associate Professor and Chair of our Diversity and Equity Committee, to join me.
Thank you, Rob. Diversity is a long-term commitment. It's beyond an evening or a lecture series. And our goal at the faculty is to create a social and academic environment where Black and Indigenous students can lead, connect, and thrive. Though we've been physically apart this year, we've worked to strengthen relationships with organizations dedicated to diversity, equity, and inclusion, and to create meaningful connections for our students. Since last summer, we've been in conversation with the leadership of BAIDA, and we're grateful for the insights that they've shared with the Diversity and Equity Committee and for their work with Nini Brody on our outreach programs. And I'm delighted to say that tonight's presentation is the first of two panels. Next fall, BAIDA leaders and members will be talking with us about how the conversations around anti-racism efforts in design are evolving. For tonight's presentation, two of our student unions, AVSU and GALDSU, have worked with BAIDA to bring about the conversation. So many thanks to our student unions and to BAIDA, and now to this evening's hosts, Clara James, Renee Powell-Hines, and Gershom Kitsa to give the land acknowledgement.
Thank you, Robert and Jane, for the introduction. My name is Clara. I'm a fourth-year student at the architectural program at Daniels, and I'm also the founder of the club Black Students in Design and a member of the Student Equity Alliance at the Daniels faculty.
My name is Renee, and I'm a fourth-year student at Daniels in Architectural Studies, specializing in technology and minoring in visual studies. I do some of the graphics for the Black Students in Design Club that Claire mentioned, and occasionally come up with a game or two to play at our bi-weekly meetings. I'm also going to be introducing Kitsa, who will be helping moderate the chat. He's also a fourth-year student at Daniels, and he is passionate about listening to and helping tell culturally relevant stories.
And now we will begin with the land acknowledgement. First, I wish to acknowledge this land which the University of Toronto operates. For thousands of years, it has been the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and most recently, the Mississaugas of the Credit River. Today, this meeting place is still home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and we are grateful to have this opportunity to work on this land. Daniels honors Indigenous peoples, past, present, and future, here and around the world. We wish to pay respect to local elders, including those of the lands from which you are joining us virtually today. I will now introduce the organization at the center of today's event. Our 6 guests for the evening are members of BAIDA, the Black Architects and Interior Design Association. BAIDA is a nonprofit organization of planners, interior designers, architects, and students that aim to support diversity, equity, and inclusion in the profession of architecture and interior design. One of the only organizations within Toronto connecting architects and interior designers, BAIDA seeks to create opportunities for other minorities through advocacy, mentorship, networking, and outreach. In conversation with BAIDA invites 6 members of BAIDA to share their work within the organization and their individual experiences leading up to and within the field of architecture and interior design. Hosted by students at the Daniels faculty, we hope that this discussion will highlight the work of Black designers within the GTA and inspire students to connect with the organization. I would now like to go over a few housekeeping items. Each speaker will introduce themselves, present their work, and give you some background on their work that BAIDA does. The format will be similar to a Peach-or-Picture style. Each speaker will present 12 slides shown for 20 seconds each. We will then move on to a discussion period, and we encourage you to participate. Please use the chat section for comments and the Q&A box to send us your questions, and we will relay them to the presenters. You can find the chat at the bottom of your Zoom screen. We will answer all the questions during the Q&A period at the end of the event. While we would like to keep this discussion informal, we ask that you please remain respectful.
Thank you, Clara. I will now be presenting our speakers for tonight's event. Our first speaker will be Bridget Brown. Bridget Brown is a registered interior designer at the international design firm IBI Group's Toronto office. She serves as the Director of Outreach for Interior Design on the BAIDA team. Please join me in welcoming Bridget.
Hello, everyone. Good evening, and thank you for having me. A bit about myself. I was born in Toronto, but from the ages of 3 months old to 5 years old, I lived on a farm in a very rural part of Jamaica. My creative interest started very early, which led me to pursuing fine arts at OCA, now known as OCAD-U. At OCA, I was introduced to interior design, which I did not know was a career at the time. I found interior design satisfied my creativity, but combined technical aspects, which I felt was a better fit for me. So I switched program streams. Interior design has led me from that rural farm to working on a wide variety of project types, locally and internationally. The following slides show some of my favorite projects, starting from one of my first to one of my latest projects. I really enjoy complex projects, by which I mean projects with maybe over-the-top finishes and spaces, but within the strict confines of code challenges as it pertains to that kind of occupancy. It could be a project that has many different parts. For example, embassies that are often have residential, public event, and private and public office spaces, as well as a great deal of security to work around and incorporate, often without it being visible. I also enjoy working on spaces where many different types of people need to feel comfortable, such as post-secondary, healthcare, and transportation buildings. They're not spaces that you tend to visit for pleasure, but need to be designed so that you're comfortable in for your limited stay. Also, one of my favorite types of projects were museum exhibits. In many ways, it was like working at the Discovery Channel. Not only are you contributing to the design of these spaces, but you're also learning a lot about the topics of the exhibits, whether that be evolution, ancient mammals, or the War of 1812, and figuring out how to present this information in an engaging way. The last aspect I enjoy is not about the project type itself, but about working through challenges of projects, whether that's working with a difficult contractor, spaces with lots of surprises, like older buildings, or clients with constantly challenging technological needs, or business group changes. This forces me to struggle a bit, but in the end, I learned from those struggles. This could be learning about a new building type, how people navigate the world, the psychology of the different types of spaces, interesting topics, and how to present them in innovative ways, or just learning how to work through a project that is in constant flux. Ultimately, I like the design experience and learning through that experience. Also, in the end, seeing the physical manifestation of the work you helped create is such an amazing feeling. There's nothing like the first time you walk into a space and the contractors are gone, the space has been cleaned, the construction debris is gone, and you see how everything has finally come together. It makes you feel so proud of the work that you have done. Lastly, why am I a part of the BAIDA Outreach Task Force? In the last 20 years that I've been part of the design industry and all the different projects that I've worked on, I've actually only worked with 3 Black designers on 3 projects. In general, I feel the design industry lacks diversity, and this stifles design as we miss out on global perspectives and different points of view. As a Black designer, I feel I should help make people aware that we exist and our work is out there. And in turn, encouraging young Black creatives to pursue this amazing career, bringing more diversity to the future of the field. Thank you again.
Thank you, Bridget. Our next speaker is going to be Tura Cousins Wilson. Tura Cousins Wilson is a licensed architect in both Ontario and the Netherlands and is a founding partner of SOCA, the Studio of Contemporary Architecture. He founded this studio alongside BAIDA treasurer Shane Laptis. Tura is a BAIDA director of networking in the architecture stream. Now I'll turn it over to Tura.
Hey, thanks for the introduction. Okay, really quickly, I got 12 slides, 4 minutes. Yeah, my name is Tura. I'm an architect in Ontario, the Netherlands. I graduated my undergrad in architecture from Ryerson University and did my master's at Delft University, University of Technology in the Netherlands. And been working past 10 years at various offices in Toronto, most recently Diamond Schmidt. Recently, I've full-time launched on my own practice with my partner, Shane Laptis. This is us with our COVID afros back in the summer on a rooftop of our studio on Queen East. And we're doing a lot of work residential, going quickly here. One being my grandmother's house was my first big project, which was reinterpreting my grandmother's house after she passed, painting the front porch in her favorite color. And it's designed around a large void cut out of her former bedroom and a basement apartment, which you can see to the left here. And I'd lived in quite a few basement apartments. And for me, super important to have a lot of light. I hated some of the apartments I lived in. So yeah, that was one of the features. And then as I was saying, the void to the right was a cutout. And you see the picture there is done by an amazing Toronto artist, Rajni Pereira. And then the front porch was another feature, looking at just restoring the front porch to its glory of its Edwardian heritage, in yellow in my grandmother's favorite color. And obviously a front porch was where I got married, kind of celebrating the front porch as the public element of the house. And I'd like to see more houses with front porches in contemporary architecture. Also doing a lot of residential projects. So this is an interior project for a loft on King West, King and Niagara. I really like the residential projects where you can get into a lot of details that you can't do at larger scale projects that I did in my former office at Diamond Schmidt. And we're also doing a lot of civic work. This is a soccer clubhouse in Collingwood. Those of you not familiar with Collingwood, it's really close to the Blue Mountain, the ski resort, which I'm sure you're familiar of. And yeah, soccer clubhouse with change rooms, washrooms. And we're really interested in exploring brick. So we've been doing a lot of testing with brick. You can see in this image here, so this cream color brick and just the angles and curved corners and corbelling. So yeah, brick is definitely an interest of our office. So we're doing work at this scale. And we're also doing conceptual work. So the next slide here. Yeah, and an interest is strip malls, and this was work done by Shane, myself, and a couple other members of BAIDA. Was looking at strip malls, particularly in sort of inner suburban areas. There's a vibrancy to them. They're kind of remain outside kind of the mainstream urban discourse. A lot of them we're losing. So this was a proposal looking at strip malls and looking at how they can develop incrementally. Understanding that car-centric suburbs aren't going anywhere, but how can you sort of humanize some of the public spaces around them, and how can you sort of imagine new density that doesn't sort of destroy, sort of obliterate the area. In a similar theme, in collaboration with Black Urbanism Toronto, another great group you guys should check out, and OAC, we're looking at Eglinton West, which has undergone a lot of gentrification, specifically the Jamaican section near Marley and Oakwood, and dealing with issues of gentrification, the new transit line. The project was, again, addressing things about how can you sort of add density incrementally that, you don't destroy sort of the cultural value. And I think similar things could be said for like Chinatown or Little Italy or the Gay Village. And yeah, those are some of the things that we've been focusing on here. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation, Tura. Our next speaker is going to be Brent Hughes. Brent Hughes holds an advanced diploma in architectural technology from Sheridan College and a Bachelor of Design degree from OCAD University. After working with prestigious firms such as Parkin Architects Limited and WZMH Architects, he launched his architectural design practice, ABA Hughes, in 2010. Please welcome Brent.
Thanks, Renee. As mentioned, my name is Brent Hughes, architectural technologist and serial entrepreneur. Primarily working in the residential space. I have had exposure to both industrial buildings like hospitals, as well as large-scale commercial projects such as high-rise offices, which has given me quite some experience. Some of my earlier experiences would have begun even in high school at Adamson's, but I think it's important that we find a way to kind of catalog all of our experiences, as it's only in retrospect you would find, you know, all of these other jobs that we do in our career having significant impact on how we perform our daily duty. Such as the case with BIM, you know, I consider myself a BIM enthusiast, which is building information modeling. And having been exposed to that at Parkin, I really lean on it now as the backbone of my workflow, you know, allowing me to build off of that, you know, things like collision detection and collaboration. A lot of people might say, you know, it might be like overkill to model all of the structure in a residential context. However, these are the opportunities that I use to kind of really lean into some of the things that I'm coordinating, such as the structural elements and the mechanical elements, as well as interiors. Building momentum, I think is important that as we do a project, we not only think of what we're doing for the success of that project in this moment, but also what's coming after. How do what we do impact not just this project, but how we actually design in future projects. And in that sense, you know, I always try to revisit the process. Having built on that experience from that past house, which was my first, in this project, I was able to engage more in construction administration, working alongside the contractor and the sub-trades to help them solve on-site issues as well as material selections. And then again, building on those experience, I would find that I had a sudden interest in interior materials, not just from the perspective of, you know, providing detailed drawings and how they're going to be put together, but even the materiality of these finishes, you know, the textures, how it looks on different lighting. And then these experiences roll into future projects. Once I find myself in a position where I'm actually doing multiple projects, I actually started to focus on creating a style. And for me, critical regionalism, that's one of my pillars, as it really allows me to hit modern design in a context of community. It's a bit difficult to grow in a comfort zone. So I would recommend to anybody, if you're looking to come out of your comfort zone, construction will help you with that. But as difficult as it seems, there's so much that you could learn from the challenges faced when you're going through construction projects. And again, revisiting the process with that new perspective that you get from all of these projects, and really looking at how it is it could improve your workflow, starting not just from the drawings this time, but, you know, through the things like the renders, as well as the construction, dealing with on-site issues. Once I have this down, or once I got this down, I found myself finding more time to approach projects in a more playful way, such as this project from Word, where the client was seeking a pop-up retail building using modular shipping container homes or shipping containers as a concept, but still staying true to their branding. And again, in that sense, I would always say you always look to be developing yourself in the context of community. I give thanks to Daniels as well as BAIDA for allowing opportunities exactly like this to allow me to share my experience in a meaningful way. So thanks again, guys.
Thank you so much, Brent. Our next speaker is going to be Kathryn Lawrence. Born and raised in Kingston, Jamaica, Kathryn Lawrence moved to Canada to pursue her degree at Sheridan College. After graduating in 2019, she joined the Perkins and Will Toronto team and will be sharing her journey with us this evening. Welcome, Kathryn.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm gonna let this slide pass and wait till we go to the next one. But basically, this is a snapshot of that introduction, my journey to date. For the purpose of this presentation, I'm really going to be focusing on what my drivers are, both primary and secondary, and how I've developed some navigational tools for life and just in the industry so far. And looking at my drivers, really, spirituality, creativity, community, heritage, identity, these are the things that really make me up at my core. And from them, I've developed specific core values that I've used to kind of motivate me and push me, as I've been going along my journey: compassion, expression, connection, courage, confidence, and, those specific things that define why I do what I do. Growing up, I loved the visual arts. It was the art form that chose me. And, I wanted to choose a career that was based in creativity and expression, as well as allow me to experience and explore the technical side. And that's what interior design has been thus far. So far, working in the industry, I've had opportunities to realize this passion, realize this form of expression, and see different moments that have basically reminded me of why I'm here, which really leads me to my first navigational strategy, which is really just learning to embrace, to define, and to trust your drivers, learning to embrace the things that really and truly, define why you are here, especially as a student listening to this. Really, you have a reason. There's a reason why you chose architecture and design. And it's really about remembering that as you progress into the industry, because that's what's going to motivate you, that's what's going to push you, and that's what's going to keep you excelling as you progress and continue to develop. Connection for me, bred from my primary driver of community, is very important. While I was transitioning to Canada, I formed an organization back home called the Ubuntu Creative Arts Project. Our goal was to provide support for emerging creative professionals. And I found that as I came here, I wanted to continue to foster that idea of connection. I came here alone, didn't know anybody, and I wanted to understand the Canadian landscape as well as the architecture and design landscape. And for me, as a student, the best way to do that was really to get involved in associations and committees, take part in competitions and really see what's out there, network and volunteer at events. And I find that even now after graduating, some of these relationships have actually even continued. So, my relationship with Arido being on their diversity and inclusion committee right now, my relationship with BAIDA that was fostered virtually, interestingly enough, last year, given COVID, and just other initiatives that have come up on the radar, that leads me to my second most important navigational strategy, which is really based in the concept of Ubuntu. The definition is right there. It's the idea of embracing the community that surrounds you and embracing the fact that, you don't operate by yourself. And while you are paving the way for yourself, you're also paving the way for others who are coming behind you. So, embracing that, especially again, as a student coming into the industry, understanding network is also important. So really my hope from this presentation is that you take away less about my lived experience and you really think of how this applies to your own lived experience. Take the time to think of what those primary drivers are for you and the core values that kind of follow from those, and use those to motivate you and push you as you graduate and move into the industry and develop your own design voice. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kathryn. Our next speaker is going to be Salome Tonge. Prior to migrating to Canada, Salome Tonge studied interior design at the International Fine Arts College in Miami, Florida. She is a NCIDQ certified interior designer and an NKBA associate kitchen and bath designer. Please welcome Salome.
Thank you very much for that wonderful introduction, and thank you to Daniels for inviting me this evening. My journey into interior design began on the beautiful island in the Caribbean of Antigua. For me, it was a fascination and curiosity with art and with nature. When I realized in high school that art could be more than a hobby, it could actually be a career, my entire perspective changed. And that led me to the International Fine Arts College in Miami, where I turned the dream into a reality and majored in interior design. Majoring in interior design has done so much for me. My first introduction was in residential. To me, I approach design as a blank canvas that is waiting to come alive with beauty and with art. And that is how I approach every single project that I have worked on since my beginning in this career. I have had the opportunity to work in commercial design. However, like Brent and Tura, I find the residential field to be most appealing because of the one-on-one interaction with the client. It brings life into a project for me. When I see the joy in a customer's face, when they step into a room that they wanted to express how they feel, but they just did not know how to do it. And I was able, through my skills in interior design, to help them to make that dream into a reality, and just to look on their face and to know that I've made a difference in the way that they interact with their families, the way they interact with the space, is just a total joy for me when I think about that. Since migrating to Canada, I have had the opportunity to focus on kitchen design. Now, I know that kitchen design is not as exciting and glamorous as picking fabrics or perhaps selecting accessories and arts, but it has given me the opportunity to hone other skills that I normally would not have had, thinking in the minutest detail in terms of inches instead of feet. And that is something that I'm quite grateful for, because I have seen the difference that it has made in my customers' lives. Now, the past few months have taught us the importance of health and well-being in the spaces in which we live, work, and play. And I think this is a wonderful opportunity for all of us as current designers and future interior designers to make a difference. And as future architects, interior designers, planners, and whatever field you may choose to go in, if you permit me, I would like to share with you a few things that I've found along my journey, and I hope it will be an inspiration to you as you continue yours. The first one is to be passionate. Being passionate means that you love what you do. The second is to be resilient. Keep going when you fail, when you fall, when you're rejected, or when you're questioned. And chances are you will. And the third one is to keep an inquiring mind. Ask questions. Lots of questions, but just as important, I would advise you to listen to the answers. And whatever you choose to do, keep learning. BAIDA has given us the opportunity and a platform where like-minded professionals, we can connect with each other professionally and personally and form wonderful friendships. And as a volunteer on the outreach committee, this is my first opportunity to shed the spotlight in BAIDA. It is the first, but it certainly will not be my last. And I thank the organizers for this wonderful event. Thank you, BAIDA. Thank you to the students for their time.
Thank you so much, Salome. Our next and final speaker is Chris Williams. Born and raised in Barbados, Chris is a licensed architect at the Toronto firm WZMH. He is a founding member of BAIDA and currently the Director of Outreach in the Architecture stream. Please welcome Chris.
All right, thank you so much, Renee. So a bit more about me and my journey. So I'm born and raised in Barbados. And from the time I was a baby, I had dual citizenship in Barbados and Canada. And I always knew that I would move to Canada eventually. However, I made a pit stop in the US to do my university studies in Louisiana and Texas. Fast forward to Canada, got licensed, and I coached tennis on the side. My introduction to architecture started in high school. I attended a career fair, had no idea what I wanted to do. But when I saw the architecture booth, I was sold. I looked into the history of Barbados architecture and their evolution, and then I continued to go from there. That would have taken me to university in Louisiana. So Southern University, it was quite a contrasting experience between bachelor's and master's. So Southern University in Louisiana is a historically Black university. So obviously I was seeing a lot of people who looked like me. And then for my master's at Texas A&M, I was the only Black student in my program. So it's quite a contrast. So my experience in the US, just an observation, looking at the representation of Blacks, it was quite a low percentage in the architecture field. But I was part of an organization in NOMA, National Organization of Minority Architects, while I was in university. And I just want to contrast that to my Canadian experience. So when I moved over here, once I was looking around the industry, I felt like quite lonely because I wouldn't see anyone else who was Black. But you know what, I'll speak to this a little further on at the end of my presentation. I'll just move on to my work experience. So here we see that Callison RTKL, I worked at this firm in Dallas, a pretty large global firm, got a lot of good experience there. Then when I moved to Canada, I worked at a small firm called Telstorm. Then Turner Flesher Architects, B&H, I'm sure you guys know these names. And then I'm currently with WZMH, who I've been with for the last 5 to 6 years. So at RTKL in Dallas, I was more in the design area and helping to support the team with 3D modeling and design representation. So on the left, we have a city proposal in China, and on the right, we have a mall in Kuwait. So that was some fun stuff straight out of school. And then here in Toronto at B&H, I was fortunate to work on the Toronto Pan Am Games facilities. So on the left, we have the Toronto Pan Am Sports Center in Scarborough. And then on the right, the Markham Pan Am Center. So B&H was actually in the role of PDC, Planning, Design, and Compliance. So I was brought on in contract admin there. And then moving on to WZMH, I primarily work in the retail sector. And I never thought I would have been, but you know, things just worked out that way, and I actually love it, the intricacies of everything. So as you see in the top left, we have shops at Don Mills and then various malls. And then I have some experience on some office proposals. And fast forward to more recent years, I transitioned into more of a project managerial role where after I got licensed as an architect. So on the left, we have an HBC store, a renovation, largest, 125,000 square feet. And then on the right is a current project at Scotia Plaza Food Court. So I'm currently managing the contract admin of that. So the formation of BAIDA, I would say it started when I saw the production on CBC of Her Story in Black, where they highlighted and featured 150 Black women across Canada who've made a mark in the country. And I saw one female architect. So I reached out to her, and apparently a lot of other people reached out to her. And you know what, that has led to the formation of BAIDA, as she started an informal social gathering, and we have just built on the momentum from there. And here's a snapshot of the executive committee. I won't go through everyone, but the way we've set it up is that we have an architect on one side and then an interior designer on one side of the different task force. So the task force, as you see at the bottom, we have advocacy, mentorship, networking, and outreach. And I am, as Bridget said, I am the co-lead of the outreach task force and the architecture stream. All right, so thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Before we get to the questions period, I'd like to invite Bridget and Chris back on to share some scholarship opportunities.
Hi there. So we've been involved with T-Crew, which is the Toronto Commercial Real Estate Women. and they are part of the Crew Network, which are a 12,000 person strong group dedicated to empowering women to excel, influence, and lead throughout their commercial real estate careers. They provide programming and events to expand professional networks and develop leadership skills in its members to grow one's career and gain support from their peers. As part of the architecture and interior design community, we are very much also part of the real estate community. Therefore, T-Crew and the Crew Network are offering these scholarships and bursaries to encourage young women to enter careers within the real estate world. Thank you.
And lastly, I just wanted to highlight some of the partners who have come on board with BAIDA. So of course we have OAA and RAIC, we have IDC. I mean, you guys can see it there on the screen, but we have, just to let you know the different things that we have in the pipeline. We have 2 mentorship programs this winter and in the fall later on in the year. We have Gensler Portfolio Review, which is part of the Design TO Festival. We have the IDS exhibit. Just continued partnership with the RAIC. In December, we had a webinar, I believe it's called Lived Experiences in Architecture, where we had a panel of 3 or 4 architects, Black architects. And so we're going to be having another installment of that. We have the Interior Designers Canada, and they want to do a feature on BAIDA. We have ACE. I don't believe they're on here, but that's architecture, construction, and engineering. So that'll deal with mentorship, and so BAIDA will be heavily involved with that. And just general outreach, and sorry, I failed to mention it. Of course, we're here with Daniels. Daniels has been a huge supporter and partner with BAIDA from last year, as was mentioned before. And you know, we strive on continuing to build this strong relationship. So there are plans to have a pilot program, a design build project closer in the summer. I don't know how COVID will allow that to happen, but we're hoping for that. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Bridget and Chris, for sharing those amazing opportunities. We will now proceed with the question and answer period. So I first have a question for all of the panelists. What do you believe is the biggest challenge that inhibits the designers of color from being heard in the design industry? And anyone can answer.
I don't mind jumping in. I think most of us throughout the presentation kind of fell back on the idea of representation. I think for me, you know, it continues to be the issue where there are lots of opportunities such as BAIDA that's starting to pop up, but still it's hard for me to see myself, you know, in, let's say, management position, or even in, you know, larger scale corporate positions when, you know, you don't have that visibility or that role model to lead into. So again, for me, it would be visibility.
Yeah, I mean, to piggyback on that point, we do have some individuals who have done great things in Canada. You know, I would say first and foremost, like Sam Obo, he was a past president of the RAIC. And then we have other individuals, I won't name them. However, the numbers are so low. And like I said, from my experience, in moving here to Canada, I really wasn't seeing anyone who looked like me, especially when I would go to networking events. So I actually thought I was the only person in architecture. Since BAIDA came about, you know, I was actually pretty floored at the number of people that we have in Toronto alone. And of course, we've connected since then with people across the nation. But I just feel that with BAIDA and the momentum and all the partnerships that we are forming, I feel like things are going to increase, and we're going to get past this issue of not being heard, not being seen. So I can't really say why we're not being seen right now. It's just a low representation right now, but I think we're going to gain some momentum in the future.
I agree with both Brent and Chris. I would say it's not given the opportunity, but as Chris just said, things are changing, and I feel it will change for the better.
Sorry, can you repeat that question again?
Yes, sure. What do you believe is the biggest challenge that inhibits designers of color from being heard in the design industry?
Yeah, it's a kind of tough. Just to add to that, I think a challenge, architecture is, it's a interesting profession because it's a very much a technical profession where you can study, you can apply yourself, and to a certain degree, and you can. But then there's the other sort of artistic aspect to it itself, and there's a big portion of it is persuasion. You're constantly throughout school, you're constantly finding yourself sort of having to persuade yourself your ideas. Whether that's to say to your professor. In work, whether it's colleagues or your bosses or to a client, in that sense, even to your parents for getting into architecture, there's like, and I you think of like communities, particularly immigrant communities, they might, it's just like law might be something that kind of gets the preferred choice. And then, when I think kind of overlay things where like maybe say English is not your first language, or you're not from Toronto. And I think that there's a certain part where like there's design, but then there's also being able to be persuasive. And yeah, there's biases. So if like someone has an accent or someone, you're constantly, in architecture. So that I think that is probably one of the largest challenges, and it's kind of an unseen challenge. What sort of like comes across as kind of like, say, good design, or sort of the clarity in expressing your ideas in that persuasion. And you can kind of, that communication, I think it's challenging because it's something that you can't fully pinpoint. And it can also just go unseen. Yeah, so I think that's a large challenge. I think, I kind of asked the question too of this, like, I'm a big hockey player. I grew up playing hockey, and, sort of like, why aren't there, say, more Black hockey players? And, I really think it's, it's a broader question of just increasing the middle class. I think, the more middle class people there are, the more people will go into architecture, the more people. So yeah, and it's I think, yeah, it's a challenging thing. I think a lot of it is kind of hidden.
I'd actually like to, add to that. I also think it's a natural instinct for people to connect with people who look like them, and so to get into an inner circle of an industry that most people don't look like us. I think sometimes it's difficult, and I think that happens in a lot of industries. For whatever reason, this industry, has that in terms of Black people. There are so few of us, but I think one of the things is once you're in there and you start connecting with other people. Like we are through BAIDA, and letting other people know about maybe job opportunities, or how to help navigate, that will make a real difference. I think it already has been making a difference, but I think that natural instinct to connect with people that look like you makes a big difference.
Thank you so much for those amazing answers. Renee, would you like to ask a question?
Yes, yeah. To build off of that conversation that we were having, I wanted to ask, other than outreach, as a current designer, and this is for everybody, what can you say is being done in order to facilitate strong foundations for future Black architects to be successful?
nice take a stab. I think, well, in addition to outreach, I've seen the rise of a lot of, initiatives within organizations themselves. I think especially last year, there was a lot of reform when you look at mandates and different things that organizations have. They really, look back at those things and said, okay, what can we do? What can we change? And so I think that companies have started to ask themselves, how can we facilitate diversity, equity, and inclusion? And, by default, at PW, we've started, or what we call our side committee, strengthen equity in diversity and equity. And I think in a similar vein, other organizations have done the same thing. So in addition to the outreach, in addition to the efforts by ARIDO and the OAA, I think a lot of people really do care now. And so the foundation is being built like holistically across the board.
Thank you so much, Kathryn. I have another question. What would you say is the most exciting part of your job, and what have you learned that differs from your educational experience? And this is for anyone on the panel.
I guess I can start. I would say the fast-paced nature of it, just the multitasking on a daily basis. You have your cup of coffee and then you just get going, and it's a juggling act, but I relish it. I just love the challenge. It's something about when I was in high school in Barbados. I just loved when we would have challenges and I was able to conquer that challenge at the end. So I've carried that into my professional life. So I love that. And I believe Bridget had mentioned it in her presentation, that at the end of the project, I think that's the most fulfilling part, is you spend so much time day in, day out on these projects, trials and tribulations. And then at the end, you see your project come to fruition. And it's just a super proud moment. So that's what I really enjoy about it. Yeah.
I agree. I would definitely say the look on the customer's face when they see the final project.
I'd also like to add that I actually like during the construction phase as well. I like going on site. I like talking to the contractors. I like talking to the trades, and things come up and you have to sort of work them out on the spot. So I like that sort of dialogue of, well, what are we going to do now? Like, this is where we are. We found this issue. How are we going to work it out? And so that sort of feeds into what Chris said about the fast-paced aspects. Because sometimes, if you have the trades on site, you don't want to spend a lot of time making decisions because, they're there, maybe not working because something has come up. So yeah, I really love the construction phase, but yeah, the ultimate, the cherry on top is definitely when you see the project at the end fully completed.
Incidentally, the second half of your question, I think Bridget just answered it, which is the portion that's not taught in school, because there's no way for you to troubleshoot what can happen on a job site. That can be taught in school. I think that is something that has to be learned in the field.
Just to add, I would say there was a lot of phases for me that I really enjoy, and some not so much. One, I really enjoy the what if stage, schematic conceptual design, and there's something really kind of, I think, profound with our profession. You're taking kind of really ideas in your head and, you're turning them to tangible things. And yeah, if if it goes well, if a project goes well, it's icing on the cake just because it'll be there at the end. I've been on some larger projects where, certain things don't turn out, but you make the best of it. But yeah, I think there's a lot of stages in architecture. And I think it also affords for a bunch of different personality types. I think there's this kind of this view of architects, they're just dressed in black and they're there, they're sort of type A personality, and they do a sketch and like voila, it's done. But some of the buildings, especially really large buildings, they take a lot of time. So there's, you can be very introverted personality type, or you can really like just detailing, or you can like kind of like formal explorations. I think it's a profession that offers a lot of space. To answer the second question, I think there's a lot of differences, and rightly so. I think in a lot of ways, like academia should be separated from practice. I think there's, to a certain degree, I don't know. I have skepticism of kind of pedagogies that look at sort of like really trying to replicate the real world. I think there's opportunity for academia to kind of be separate. I would say I think one of the biggest challenges, and I think most students and people I talk to agree, is that you come out of school, and for the most part, most people don't care about architecture, and it's really kind of sad to talk about it. Even clients, even other architects. So yeah, I think it's a challenge where it's like you're in school. It's just sort of this world, this bubble where it's this architecture, pushing design, pushing ideas, and often kind of like what sort of drives an architectural idea in school doesn't get you that far in the real world. So and I think it's a challenge of like wherever you are in your career, just how to navigate through that, whether you're running your own practice or you're working in an office. And I think there's always little ways you can do that.
Thanks so much for those responses. My next question that I wanted to ask all of you was, how has your business changed during the pandemic? And do you feel that it has been disproportionately affected at all compared to other industries?
I could feel that. I think, like most of us, the pandemic has been a little bit, gut-wrenching in terms of normal day-to-day operations. For me, I have been able to be a bit resilient, but there's definitely been a loss in revenue and streams of projects. In this particular point in time, I'm kind of using the opportunity to kind of embrace that principle of being resilient and kind of retooled, not necessarily looking forward for things to snap back to the old way, but kind of, again, reworking that workflow and looking at how I could do things, moving forward. In terms of being, disproportionately affected, it's a bit hard to say. I guess it could be considered subjective. I would, in one instance, say no, because all of us have been affected, but at the same time, being Black in architecture, and then the nature of this, winning contracts where, you have to be not only visible, but also, knowing people and being introduced to people, definitely will have impacts differently based on any particular individual. So on one hand, it could be considered no, we kind of all in this together, we all going through the same thing, but everybody coming from uniquely different perspectives, it could easily be seen the other way.
I can add maybe slightly to that if anyone else wants to go.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things. One is, moving from a pretty, working in a firm with about 300 people to just running your own practice. I think the day-to-day changes with COVID, you're not, we're working from home. So the communication is, online, it's over Slack, it's like phone calls and emails. So that design process is a lot different. Hopefully we'll kind of be back to normal soon. And then kind of add to like Brent, I think, from running your practice, like the whole business development changes, networking, you're not going to those events. I think one thing, we're kind of doing civic and also residential. I think there's been a surge in more residential work, which is good. And I think with some civic stuff, it's a bit slower, less like RFPs. So that kind of nature has changed. Hopefully it's kind of just COVID is short-lived, already been a year, but yeah.
Yeah, that is true. I found for residential, because people are working from home, they are seeing the deficits in their spaces. And so they're trying to make the change, especially because you're not traveling. So the funds that you would have allocated for travel is being put into the home.
Yeah, and I guess from my point of view, working with WZMH, I have to say that they've done a pretty good job just being flexible with the whole transition to working from home. I know we've been working with Microsoft Teams for quite a while, but while we were in the office, I don't think we maximized it. We obviously didn't see a need for it like that.
Mhm.
Once we got home, because we had it in place already, we became reliant on it, and it has proven to be quite efficient. So, obviously we missed that whole face-to-face interaction, going in the office and just chit-chatting and doing things directly, but the Microsoft Teams has led to quite a bit of efficiencies, just sending short messages, creating meetings, all that kind of stuff. So it's been pretty good. For me personally, I mean, my wife and I, we have a little child, so working from home, it was still a tough transition dealing with that side of things. But what I thought was, for us, we found it was important to have a structure. So that structure definitely helped us to get through the pandemic. So that would be my advice, is just having that structure and still be flexible. You have to be flexible to adapt to all these different changes. So, yeah.
Thank you guys so much for those answers. So we have a question from Dima Ghazal. Apologies if I mispronounced that. Are there any plans to foster a mentorship program with younger high school students to encourage them to pursue a career in the design industry? If any of the members of the panel know of similar opportunities, please share with us.
Well, I'll take that.
Okay.
Sorry. Go ahead, Chris.
No, you go ahead, Ashley.
Okay, so we do have a mentorship task force. So we're always looking for opportunities where we can mentor students. I think right now it's more of people who are already in the in architecture and design programs. But what we would like to do, and what some of the initiatives we are working on, is sort of doing more sort of a career day, going into schools and talking to students, hopefully in person at some point. But yeah, giving students opportunity to talk to us about the profession.
If I could jump in, I just thought that was actually like a really good point that you brought up. Just in touching what even Kathryn was mentioning, where although we're looking at this in a very holistic manner, it's kind of difficult to see representation, expand at the top when we don't deal with, encouraging people at a younger level to get involved. As typically in this industry, you find that, people kind of phase out as they go through from first year to third year, and even as they get into the post-secondary experiences, they might end up changing career paths. So again, just thanks for that question, because it is something that we definitely focused on.
Yeah, so we're still in the process of forming these relationships. As I mentioned, we are looking to partner with ACE, and that will be definitely a mentorship program. And I don't know all the details, so I'll definitely have to come back to that, but I believe it will entail mentoring high school students. And on that note, I mean, we have actually had some high school students who've reached out to us from Alberta. It's just that we don't have anything formalized at the moment. We're trying to help people on a one-off basis. So all of that is just in process right now.
Just to add to that, I think it's just important, even though we don't have things that are fully formalized yet, I think speaking for myself, and I think other members of BAIDA have, you know, individually gone to high school career day events. So I would just add, if there's like high school students, or if there's anyone, if there's teachers listening, and you know are organizing a career day at their school, you're more than welcome to reach out with an idea, and you know propose that to BAIDA, and whether BAIDA takes that on as a group, or you know individual members of BAIDA participate.
Great, thank you so much. I will probably be taking you up on proposing ideas. So next we have an anonymous question from the chat that reads as follows. Thank you, each of you, for sharing about your work and your experiences. It was inspiring. I'm curious about ways of weaving interests or passions outside of work, be they climate activism, social justice, cyclical poverty, food waste, et cetera, into design. Can you speak on ways in which interests outside of your practice have influenced your design work, and possibly vice versa?
For me, again, I think almost every experience should have a hand in the way you approach your design problems. I think Tura mentioned that he was looking for more balconies, you know, on more front-facing balconies. And again, in the context of something like critical regionalism, you know, and dealing with clients on a one-on-one, a lot of my clients come from, you know, outside of this country and have different experiences in different kind of architectures that more native to their region. And, you know, in coming up to Canada, you're kind of faced with the decision of, you know, do we approach something like modernism, you know, in a way that is, you know, copy paste or what we're seeing using the same materialities, or do we kind of stretch out of our own experiences and kind of rely on experiences outside of what we know or what we taught, and bring that into our design. So definitely everything from, you know, just the way how you function socially, or, you know, the way how your clients function socially, or the way how you see people interact in school playgrounds, on the street, the way you live your life, really. Like, architecture is a byproduct, or is a lifestyle, right? Architecture should be a byproduct of a lifestyle, or something, some function that needs to be served.
I also feel that sometimes, yeah, anything that you do can influence your work, whether that be travel, whether that be, you know, the movies that you watch. I think architecture and interior design is very much a part of you, regardless of what the style is that ultimately comes out. It is very much a part of you. There is a huge part of it that's very personal and subjective. And so, yeah, it's always a part of you. Even sometimes you're designing something that's not, you know, and you're in a larger firm, it's not necessarily the style that you would choose, because of you know, numerous reasons, or because you're on a larger team, but there's always elements that are part of what you're putting into it. You know, it's not like, you know, just a math where, you know, 1 + 1 = 2. You know, there is so many things that influences all those little parts. So yeah, I think every aspect of my life eventually somehow makes it into design, even if in a very small way.
Absolutely, I agree with that. Every single thing does make a difference, because that's where you go back to having an open mind, because you're not just designing for yourself, you're designing for other people, and everybody sees life from a different perspective. And so the more open-minded you are, then you can communicate to people and understand them from the level at which they're coming from.
Yeah, I agree. Continuing on that vein, it's like I notice a lot of us on this call have accents. So it's almost like design and the way you approach it is like an accent, right? You know, you move to different places and it may be softened based on the surrounding environment. But at the end of the day, you know, the way I say location is going to always be the way I say location, you know? So really, it's as you said, I don't think we have a choice. The way who we are and the surrounding experiences that we have will always influence the way that we relate to others and design.
Thank you so much for that. So we have another question from Anonymous. For working in more international firms, if you could speak to how the design process from client meetings to design choices might differ when working on projects outside of North America, given that the firms you work with and your education is predominantly North America based.
Well, for most of the international projects, I've probably done, I think, 3 or 4. A lot of it, we always have a local architect there. And so sometimes we're designing a concept and they are sort of vetting it. One of the projects that I worked on was in South Korea, and we had a local architect and us. And actually, how we did that process, it was set up that we would design and take the drawings to a certain percentage, say 33%. And then those drawings would go over to them, and then they would take it from 33% to say 60%, and we would review that portion. And then at 66%, it came back to us, and they were reviewing our work. So it was a collaboration in that way. And then we ended up getting to, I think, 99%, where I think, the last little bit, they took that over because it was a local project. And so therefore, just to make sure that there was sort of any kinks in terms of code requirements or whatever weren't missed in the project, they sort of had that final 1%. Although it was a Canadian embassy, which is technically on Canadian soil, so we could have sort of ignored anything that had to do with Korean codes. But, being good Canadians, obviously we sort of merged the Canadian codes with the Korean codes in to have that final output. But yeah, it was a collaboration of the local architects and us.
One of the things I experienced the most is just the sheer scale. For me, even being in Trinidad and Tobago, working outside of residential, there's very few opportunities that I would get to do a project that would be the same size as almost any Toronto project. Whether we're talking about things like, office buildings that are high rises or infrastructure projects, they're just not available. And because of that, the entire workflow, the approach to working on these teams or the resources required to execute these projects will follow an almost completely different format that what is available in these smaller countries. So the skill set is really almost something completely different. And therein you'll get like a totally different experience.
Thank you for that response. Yeah, I hope to work in some different places around the world soon, because I think it does add a lot to your experience and it teaches you a lot about different cultures. We have a question now from Paul Bakowicz, who says, I'm sorry to have joined late, so forgive me if this question has already been raised, which I don't think it has, so you're all good, Paul. Have any of the panelists who are in architecture found that OAA mentorship program helpful in supporting the initiatives of BAIDA? And if not, do you have any idea how this could be improved?
This is not the the intern mentor, is that's not what the question is referring to?
The interim mentorship program? Is that what you're asking?
It's not the OAA in your intern for intern architects. It's not that mentor. That's not the question. Is that the question?
No, the mentorship program.
Through, I'm actually not, I don't think I'm familiar with that then.
I'm not familiar either.
Well, we can talk about the internship program because I'm definitely interested in hearing about that.
So then the question, can you just repeat the question?
Yes, so assuming we're talking about the intern program, the question is, have any of the panelists who are in architecture found that intern program helpful in supporting the initiatives of BAIDA? And if not, do you have any idea how this could be improved?
Okay, yeah, I'm not, Chris, you don't look like you're familiar with the, yeah, I'm not, I can't speak to that.
No. Yeah.
We could move on from this question if you'd like, or we can focus more on the intern program and if you guys have found it helpful.
Yeah, I just don't think we have a connection right now.
Yeah, sure.
In that regard, so yeah, I can't answer. Sorry.
Okay, no problem. I will let Clara ask the next question.
Sure. Could you speak to any of the opportunities outside of BAIDA that you've been involved with regarding diversity and inclusion while working in the design industry?
I think I can interject. I joined the ARIDO Diversity and Inclusion Committee. So, that has been an interesting relationship so far, creating the foundation for, initiatives and future mandates. In addition to that, as I said, Perkins and Will, we have our diversity and inclusion arm that we started that also has been trying to promote that as well. So those are some of the opportunities that I've seen come up or I've been able to be a part of since I've started working in the industry.
Sorry, excuse me. I know the main organization that I am aware of is BEAT, Building Equality in Architecture, Toronto. I'm not a member, but I know some of our BAIDA members are part of that. In fact, Camille Mitchell, she's been heavily involved in that. So that's one of the main equity and diversity organizations. And then, of course, we'd like to say BAIDA because, that's what we're all about. So we're hoping to strengthen that whole area there.
Great, thank you. I have a question for the group as well. I'm wondering, how has your thinking in regards to the field of architecture and design as a whole changed since the beginning of your career?
For me, I don't think it's changed at all. I still really love design. And, I love reading about design. I love being in spaces. I'm one of those people that, I walk up to walls and spaces and touch the wall to feel the texture. It's like, what is that material that somebody has used? And even in my office within, not sort of the larger interior design group, but my core team that I normally work with, I actually send out a newsletter to them, whenever I get maybe 10 to 15 different projects that I think are interesting, and just sort of send them links to to those projects. And sometimes they include architecture, interior design. It could be other types of design. It could just be a interesting product that has nothing to do with architecture, but it's a design. Could be, I don't know, a very cool watch or something. I think I just love sort of looking at beautiful things. And in fact, sometimes I send stuff that I don't necessarily like. I do a lot of commentary, some of it very sarcastic, that, says like, why is this product necessary? Or why is this space done like this? And so sometimes we get like a discussion back and forth. So I love talking about design. I don't think my opinions of it has changed at all since I entered the field.
And I would say by contrast, I have changed because I would say, back in architecture school, I always thought, once I graduate, I'll work at big firms, small firms, whatever the case is, but eventually I'll move on to have my own practice and probably do residential design, small commercial. And that has been furthest from the truth. So I've actually found myself in the retail sector. And it's interesting because, I would battle with myself on saying, Chris, you need to be in design. You need to be design. You need to eat, sleep, breathe design. And I actually came to the realization that it actually was not me fully. I still love design, but I wasn't in it all in. I actually found myself, being more attracted to the entire process, the whole dealing with people, the project management side of things. So that's why I'm focusing on the whole, whether it's production drawings and then going into contract admin. That's the part that I really relish. So it has changed for me.
Yeah, I think you're very similar to me. When that's the thing about this entire industry. There's so much room for lateral growth, where you could enter in on one side and then come out on a completely different side, such as contract admin. At some point in time, like definitely consider just becoming a stone salesman, just because you move from architecture to construction, and then you find yourself mesmerized with just dealing with clients and selling stone, selling material. If you could only see this material everywhere, that would be, in a sense, very satisfying. So it's a lot of retooling. It's a lot of constantly reevaluating and just being malleable, as is the nature of design.
I agree 100%. For me, it has changed because when you're in school, you operate in a vacuum. This is the box that you think design is. When you go into the actual world and you see what it is all about, it is hard work. It is challenging, but then it's still also rewarding too. And as I evolve, my thoughts of design evolve as well, because I think it's completely limitless.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think coming out of school, what has changed is that I've just developed a deeper respect for the profession. Being able to not just see the behind the scenes of everything that you're taught in school, but actually witness it in action with some of my more senior colleagues and just be like in awe, constantly. I think that's how it has shifted for me. Yeah.
Yeah, I think a bit of an abstract question, but for me, to a certain degree, I entered architecture schools like fresh out of high school, 18 years old, not fully knowing what architecture is, and developing a language and appreciation for architecture and architects. And so I think to that degree, my appreciation for architecture hasn't changed. And my dream was to always sort of have my own practice. That so in that sense, that's kind of living that out. One thing I would say that's changed is I say no a lot more now than just like being like in school and it's like super zealous. It's like, oh, there's a design competition. It's like do this and like and I think managing your time with design, like the amount of all-nighters you used to pull in school and all of that. So and I think that changes with time and knowing where to put your energy and what to focus on. That's changed. And I think architecture is also a profession where you can really, it's pretty broad, even you're talking about like adjacencies, like you could go into sales representative for a certain specific product, or you could go into construction. But even within architecture, there's a lot that you can really branch out to. So it's not like you have to sort of follow one path, and that even gets into like becoming licensed. For a while before I was licensed, I was doing work through a BCIN, and there's a number of, which is a building code identification number. It allows you to build, depending on what BCIN you have. You can do small buildings and houses up to 3 stories. There's a lot of great firms that do that, and I think that's important just to know that's like you don't need to kind of have. There's not one path. Whatever there's quite a few things you can take. And I think this panel kind of is a good illustration of that.
Thank you so much. So we have one more question from the Q&A. And this person says, not sure if this was responded to yet, and I missed it, but do you have any suggestions as to how architectural groups can better reach out to minorities and get them involved?
I think to reiterate what we were talking about earlier is getting into schools at younger ages. Because I think if somebody has already decided at a certain point, if they're already in architecture school, they've been exposed, to the industry. And like I said in my presentation, is that I really had no idea that interior design existed as a profession. I mean, it's been a while, and back then there wasn't any HGTV that with every design show on. I think really, from TV, it was sort of like Mike Brady from the Brady Bunch was the only concept of an architect that I knew anything about. So I think, just getting kids like exposed, and not necessarily that they're going to ultimately get into that profession, but at least that seed is planted at an earlier age. So like middle school would be a good place to start.
I think the panel would agree that the objective of something like this is to make it easier for those of you that are in school than it was for us, and ultimately make it easier for those who are coming after you than it will be for you, if we do it right.
Yeah, I think agree to all of that. And I think a big part of what we do is the actual built environment. I like to think, I don't know, maybe this is too lofty of an idea that, doing good work has the potential to kind of influence someone, inspire. A lot of things we talked about was, mentorship, organizations such as BAIDA or BEAT, or that kind of advocacy. And I think a big part of also what we do is like the impact of design and, inspiring people and, bringing architecture to just a larger conversation, a broader public, even beyond identity, just broader conversation with the civic realm. I think will inevitably, hopefully we'll get more people involved and interested and sort of curious about architecture and what architects do. I think it's kind of like what we do on kind of in events like this, but also like literally the kind of the tangible product at the end of the day that we produce.
Sorry, I guess to add on to that, I mean, naturally, like if architectural groups want to reach out to minorities, I think naturally they can reach out to BAIDA. Even if we don't have, an immediate relationship with certain minorities, we may find some way to connect with them, because we have different paths. We have other groups on Facebook that we can connect with and generate some interest and connect people. So, let's use BAIDA as a connector. That's all I'll say for now.
And yeah, Beat has been like that.
And Beat,
I
yes.
was recently on a panel with Beat, and I'm not a member of Beat. And Beat started off as, you know, building equity in architecture, specifically focused on women in architecture. We're talking about like people of color, Black people. You know, there's also lack of representation across all spectrums. You know, from with women, and you know, it started with specifically women. And I think when you talk about these things, you sort of identify other areas where there's like lack of inclusion. And I think, you know, with BAIDA, yeah, there's the focus on specifically within the like Black communities in Canada, more specifically in Toronto, and I think it's also just as we grow, and it's also just sort of finding sort of allegiances and allying ourselves with other groups, which we've done in the past. And I think the other thing is, you know, groups is also then I think it's just more of these conversations. I know with my past office, Diamond Schmidt, you know, they've been doing a lot of work with BAIDA, and you know, they've created an inclusion sort of committee within the office, and just looking at, you know, and back to my point where it's like, you know, there's a lot of things that are not overt. You know, and Bridget was talking about, you know, there's like, you know, people just sort of kind of affiliate with sort of like-minded or like culture people, and it's easy to kind of be cliquish in the profession. You know, you hire someone that you know, and you know, sometimes, and I can even say to that, you know, I've had jobs where I've just responded to a post, but you know, and I've gotten a lot of jobs, you know, through knowing someone, which is important. Yeah, so and I think it's kind of both. It's, you know, collectively getting yourself out there. It's, you know, in your organization, wherever you are, it's, you know, you're running your own practice, or you're in a larger organization. It's, you know, if you can, commenting or helping contribute in any way possible, or, you know, in schools, even, you know, talking within your family, like having conversations about architecture, if it's something you're interested in. You know, it's something, you know, I know, like my mom would never talk about architecture, but you know, I think the more architecture becomes part of a broader discourse, and I truly believe that people fundamentally are interested in architecture. Everyone lives it. Everyone sort of has a comment about architecture. And you know, and I know my mother was like, we complained about like contemporary architecture is all this like steel and glass, and but you know, when we actually have like conversations with her, like she would be like, you know, I like that building. It's like, hey, it's steel and glass, and you know, and so I think the more architecture becomes part of a broader discourse publicly, the better. The more people will get involved. In addition to like kind of the more behind the scenes work that we're talking about, and the advocacy that, you know, BAIDA is doing.
And sorry, and speaking of more people getting involved, I just want to make it clear as well that BAIDA is, in terms of volunteering, we're very open to people volunteering and helping out, and it's definitely not limited to just Black people volunteering. So we don't want people to feel apprehensive about that. You know, we are all inclusive in that regard. So feel free to check our website. Just reach out to any one of us on the executive committee. We have the info@baida.ca as well. So check it out. And if you feel like helping us out, please join us. We're trying to make this a whole better profession, both architecture and interior design. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Christopher. I was actually just going to ask if you guys could sort of share how to get in touch with you. And maybe you could talk about your upcoming events so that we can wrap up.
You put me on the spot. Okay, so we do have, Gensler has a portfolio review coming up this week. So it's for the Ryerson students, Black students. So I'll be taking part in that, and there are numerous architects from different firms they'll be participating in that. Outside of that, I've actually, I can't recall right now. Bridget, can you help me out there?
Well, we're working with quite a few different groups. In terms of events coming up, I think there have been a few that obviously have been put on hold, or we had planned to, but basically all the groups that were mentioned earlier that we're working with, like we do have events planned for that. I'm not certain about anything coming up eminently, but obviously, you know, if you check our social media, you know, we're always posting, you know, our next events. So, but yeah, we were, you know, trying to do some stuff with T Crew and a couple of other different places, but right now it's still a little bit hard. I think people were precariously hoping that this spring would be an easier time in terms of COVID, but you know, obviously with a lot of the latest lockdowns and things, things are, you know, being pushed back. Hopefully soon we'll have more. In the spring, we definitely have, I think, a student-focused social that we are planning is one of the things. I think that should probably be in April, if I recall correctly. But again, like whether that's online or in person is to be seen.
Great, that's awesome. I'm definitely excited for this social. This sounds like it's going to be a lot of fun. And I myself will be participating in the portfolio review on Friday, so I'm very excited about that. So we're going to wrap up. I just wanted to say thank you to all of our speakers, Bridget, Tura, Brent, Kathryn, Salome, and Chris, for sharing your work with us and for BAIDA collaborating with our student unions to even make this event possible. Thank you to Nini and the programming team. And finally, thank you to our student union representatives, Janice Miyagi and Randa Omar, for organizing this event. To see or register for any of the Daniels events this year, just head to the news and events page on the Daniels faculty website.
The next event, the Daniels Faculty Winter Series, is Architectural Adventures in Mass Media, a lecture by Laura Lesmes and Frederick Helberg of Space Popular, on Friday, January 29th at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. GALTU, which is a graduate student union at Daniels, will also be hosting their next discussion in their series, Looking Inward and Outward, this Thursday, January 28th at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. This month's event features Cordine Lewis Allen, who will speak about his work as the director of the Youth Design Center in Brownsville, Brooklyn, New York. Thank you all for coming. We hope you had a great evening, and we will see you online again soon. Good night.
Thank you.